A journalist should be informing the public. I think a journalist has a duty to the audience. I think a journalist should be elevating things that are accurate and truthful and being very careful not to elevate things that are inaccurate and lies. I think journalists should hold people accountable, especially people in power. And I think journalists should be, pushing and asking questions for those people who are not able to ask those questions or be in the room, or who don't have the political clout or even the economic clout to push for answers. I don't think it's super complicated. I've been very disappointed today to see that a lot of political journalism is really around a game, that politics is a sport, and not sort of like, here's what it means to the audience, but more like, here's what it means to the other side in the sport, which I think is a really bad way of looking at politics. And it's also an indication of people who don't necessarily share the worries and concerns of their audience, right? Where certain things just don't matter to them because it doesn't affect them. So it's sort of funny. It's sort of a joke that they don't cover it, because most of the newsroom reporters, certainly in TV news, are not people of color, are not people who came out of poverty, are not, are not marginalized from marginalized communities, right? So it all is a big joke, some of these issues, when I think for the actual populations, it's not a big joke, that it's actually very important. But sometimes I think you wouldn't know that by looking at today's political coverage.
Yeah. You've used the term both sidesism. Can you just sort of define for us what you mean by both
Yeah,
sidesism?
I think both sidesism is where you sort of feel the need in the efforts to feel like you're being balanced, to point out something on both sides of an issue. And some issues really only have one side. Some things are just factually true, and other things are factually not true.
Mhm.
And yet, so you say, well, this person's doing this, but this person over here is also doing this. And often those two things are not equal or not related. So it becomes very both sidesy. Um, you know, um, this person over here knocked over a bank, but this person over here said a bad word once, so she's also flawed. That's a very cheesy example of kind of this idea, like you feel the need to do a story where you're this and this versus just saying, here's what the story is. Fran Tarkenton once said, if you have three quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks, right? Which is like, if you have too many things that you're trying to tell, you're really not telling anything. Sometimes you just have to go in and tell the story. What is the story you're trying to tell? Doesn't have to have another side to it. Doesn't have to. Sometimes it's just, this is what happened. This is what it's about.
Um, is it a do you think that a journalist needs to be, quote, objective? And what would that mean?
I'm not sure what objective means in reality. I think the definition of objective in a newsroom means that you subscribe to the same views as your white male middle-aged to upper middle-aged bosses,
Mm.
right? So that as long as you're kind of in the tent, then you're objective. If you feel as they feel about a topic. And so I don't think often when people, say someone's not objective, it's just actually that they just have a different opinion, that what they're calling objective isn't objective. Newsrooms, and the Washington Post is a really good example of a newsroom that loved to talk about being objective, and yet would often sort of take the police version of what happened in a community. I would say, well, that's not objective. Objective is saying that any single person in the story we have to treat as if it's their point of view, that they have a vested interest. So they are probably to some degree spinning us a little bit on what they're telling us, right? So just like we wouldn't necessarily take as, the final word, the story of a person who's in, let me think of a story I've done, who's claiming someone robbed him. And we certainly wouldn't take as final word the story of the person who has done the robbery. We're also not going to take as final word the police who are called to the scene. They all have a vested interest in how the story is presented. We understand that. So objective is understanding that all of these people have a dog in the fight, and we're going to try to help suss out what happened. Often, I think, the Washington Post is a great example because some of their correspondents have become very well known for saying, they want to believe that police are good. If you are an older white dude in DC running the Washington Post, from your point of view, the police are very good. You call them up, they come to your community, that's how they treat your community. In a lot of communities, police are not good. Police do not serve your community. And so the objective idea of like, okay, we all agree police are good. Well, there's other people who say, well, hey, from where I'm from,
Right.
that's just not true. And so I think in newsrooms, the idea of objective was often, do you just agree with that voice, which is the people who are doing the hiring? And by the way, if you're smart, you do, because guess what? You're going to keep your job. But if you don't agree, you're probably going to have some challenges. If you go into communities and understand that they feel like they're occupied, is a word that I had people say, where they feel like they're not respected. You have to say, well, that is a point of view in this community. And I'm not going to sit here and say, well, that's just not true. I don't want to hear it because my objective opinion, and so I think sometimes even the word objective is kind of a silly way to think about framing. Accurate, truthful, reliable, those are much better things to be searching for than, what is your objective opinion? And sometimes things are so objective, well, then those people are not even involved in the if you're really super objective, that maybe you don't really have any insight at all into a story.